The best thing that stops the bad guys is designing something they didn't expect.
Joining us today is Theresa Payton, one of the nation's most respected authorities on secure digital transformation. As the first female White House Chief Information Officer and now CEO of Fortalice Solutions, Theresa has spent her career combating cybercrime and advising global boards, CEOs, and technology executives.
Fraud happening is inevitable. It's part of life. A lot of people will say things, well, humans are the weakest link. No, we're not. Your technology failed them, and somebody took advantage of them. Fighting crime should never be seen as a competitive advantage. If you study the profile of cyber criminals and fraudsters, nation states, you start to see they have a pattern of how they attack the different chinks in the armor, if you will. We're the weakest link of the security industry because we keep designing terrible processes and technology around the human user story. We need to be as creative as Steve Jobs was at Apple in how we think about security constructs.
In this episode, we'll dive into her journey from the financial sector to the forefront of cybersecurity and the insights she's gained along the way.
Welcome to Success Story. I'm your host, Scott Clary. The Success Story podcast is part of the HubSpot podcast network. I am a huge fan of HubSpot because they support entrepreneurs. A lot of entrepreneurs, founders, executives listen to this show. And for entrepreneurs that are trying to build, I have a question for you. Does it feel like your teams are getting pulled in a million different directions when everyone's digging in on different projects with different platforms in different places? It can be tough to stay focused on a common goal, and that throws a wrench into things. That's why HubSpot brings everything your team needs into one easy to use and easy to love customer platform. With it, they have everything they need to scale the business at their fingertips. So your marketers can write blog posts in a snap with AI and build better leads with in-depth campaigns. Sales can build connections and close deals faster with tracking tools and real-time performance insights. Service can get a hand from AI-powered chatbots for better support and more 5-star reviews. And everyone can deliver killer results and grow revenue faster than ever before. Because when your teams work better, your business grows faster. Visit HubSpot.com to get started for free today. Theresa, I'm very excited. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate your time. I know it's been a busy week for you, but I'm excited to do this. Obviously, a lot of the work that you've done is, I think, highly relevant and on people's minds right now. We're going to talk about sort of what you've done in politics, out of politics, and just your whole career. But like to sum up your career in cybersecurity, I think a very easy word is groundbreaking. You've done a lot of firsts, which I think is phenomenal. And you've not just done first, but you've done your work at an exceptional level. Talk to me about maybe an inflection point in your life and your career. It could be very young, could be a little bit older, that really sparked an interest in technology and security.
Sure. And, it's funny. What I would say is there's still more ground to break. And so if anybody feels like they've been left out of an opportunity to do something groundbreaking, just wait a week. You'll have something, you'll be able to do something groundbreaking. So you're still available to think about kind of the new things that are coming. But what's really interesting is I go back to high school on this one. And I'm in high school and I had to transfer schools because my daddy was a career Marine and he got stationed at Quantico. And I was going to the high school, which is the Department of Defense school that's on the U.S. military base. And one of the things that they required was you had to take at least one course in computer science. Now, had that not been required, I don't know if I would have taken it as an elective. I was loading up on things like wanted to do international finance law. That was what I thought I was going to do. I thought I was going to do huge international trade deals and one day go to law school, run for U.S. Senate. And so these were all like kind of my high school ideals of what I might be doing when I graduated from high school. And so I'm like, okay, I'll take the computer science class, whatever. And I'm going to be dating myself here, but at least for my computer science class, we were on TRS-80s. And so we were given all these different programming assignments to do. And I realized I loved it. I was good at it. And I wanted more. Like, I wanted more exposure to them. Like, what is, like, this is incredible. This idea that I could be given a set of instructions by a teacher and I could make something like a Coca-Cola logo. Don't tell Coca-Cola I said that. But like, that was one of our programs that we had to do, is like try to recreate the Coca-Cola logo in a computer program. What would that look like? And I know people listening to this today that are younger, probably like, what is she talking about? But anyways, I thought, wow, I really enjoy this and I'm good at it. So I looked for more opportunities. And when I went to college, I had a double major. I did a major in economics. I did another major in business administration. Then I did 2 certifications. I got certified in business management, and I had the opportunity to get certified in computers. And my goal was, I just wanted to always be employable. I wanted to always be able to have a job. So that's why I focused on my 4 years in undergraduate. I was like, how many degrees can I get? How many certifications can I get? And that led to University of Virginia, where I got my Master of Science. I got a call from University of Virginia my senior year. They had started a brand new program on Master of Science. They now call it a Management Information Technology. And they didn't have a lot of women apply. And I got a phone call from one of the professors who was working on recruiting candidates to be in this brand new program. So if I hadn't had that mandatory class, I don't know if I would have opted in. I'd like to think I would have, but I don't know. I might have taken an art class or more language classes. And then I got this opportunity to get certified in computers in college in my undergrad degree. I don't know that I would have gotten that phone call from University of Virginia. And that really set things in motion for how I ended up being inspired to be solving business problems, leveraging technology. And then fast forward, my husband graduated from the Naval Academy, first tour of duty post my graduation from UVA was Mayport, Florida. I love Jacksonville, Florida. However, not really a hotbed of big hiring in technology when I graduated from UVA. And I thought, oh my gosh, and the economy wasn't great. And back then, you had to fax your resumes in. I know this sounds like ancient times. Or I had to mail it in the mail. And I was getting, if I got an answer at all, it was a rejection. I could not find a job. I was applying at the mall. I was like, I could do retail because I worked in high school. I had a part-time job at the Marine Corps Exchange, which is like a mall on Quantico Marine Corps base. I couldn't even get a job like as an assistant manager in a shoe store. Like, it was really kind of.
But you were learning things that were far ahead of their time.
Well, here's the thing too. I was a Girl Scout and I had to sell cookies myself. Like, my parents did not like take my thing into work and say, buy my daughter's cookies. They're like, if you want to sell the cookies, you go door to door, you sell the cookies yourself, and you walk around with the box and you deliver them yourself. And so I am used to having doors slammed in my face. I am used to rejection. And I've learned to mostly not take it personally. And be like, I know the cookies are good and I know I'm a good salesperson. So I'll just go to the next store and I'll take the lessons learned with each door slammed in my face. So I'm sitting there in the lab one night at University of Virginia, and thank goodness my friend Sarah, she was talking to me. She had a connection with Barnett Bank, and she was able to get my resume in front of somebody at Barnett Bank. And it's a long story, but it's a funny story. And I started off working at Barnett Bank, and Barnett Bank was always focused on customer service. What are we doing to enhance the customer experience? What are we doing to meet all of our customers where they are, and really financing their dreams? Barnett Bank is now part of Bank of America. And it was a really cool time to be in banking because we were really thinking about, how do we make the ATM experience better? How do we make the phone channel experience better? We were doing some online banking through dial-up. And so it was really great because we were thinking about there's a multi-channel experience happening for our customers. How do we make it easy for our employees to service them? How do we make it easy for the customers if they start a transaction on the phone and they finish it at the branch? How does that work? And this is 1990 we're talking about here. I worked for some of the best and the brightest in financial services. And it just inspired me to think always about the human user story. And when you're implementing technology, how do you prevent fraudsters and criminals from getting in between you and your customer? But how do you also make the technology something they want to use and they're not like cursing you out when they're using it? Like, the bank just drove me to this type of...
We all experience it too. I mean, we all know that. So now you are at it's so interesting because you lived through and experienced and were building systems at the bleeding edge of tech. And when you build at the bleeding edge of tech, you also build at the bleeding edge of security and all the malicious actors that can try and take advantage, because you build it and they're going to try and break it. So you're trying to figure this out as you go. But the issue that you solved, and I've sort of read through, and you'll talk about it so that the audience can hear it from you, but one of the bigger issues that security has is it's secure and then ruins the customer experience, or it's unsecure and optimizes for the customer experience. So this is your first sort of exposure to that balance that you have to navigate.
Exactly. And sadly, fraud happening is inevitable. It's part of life, right? So the fact that some people try to dishonestly earn their money, it's a fact of life. And I wish we could find a way to make it go away, but it's always going to be with us. And it was with us before we were using technology, but it's certainly still here in the physical sense, but now also in the digital sense. And in some regards, being a criminal using digital means is somewhat easier, because if you think about it, they become very emotionally disconnected from the people they're preying on. It's one thing to look somebody in the eye and defraud them. It's another thing to never see them, and you're just casting a net out to, thousands of people, hoping you catch a live one. But there's a lack of human connection in the way digital crimes are conducted, and it's devastating. And so you could do it at speed and scale. And for the criminals, there's really not any kind of sense of remorse, because they don't really see you and I as people.
It doesn't feel like it doesn't feel real. It's real results and real impact, but it doesn't feel like you're hurting a real person. You feel like you're hurting a number on a screen. That's the difference. I see what you're saying. So this is where we see people targeting senior citizens and stuff like that. Like just the most horrible crimes.
Oh, and they're horrible. And we get stress calls, and I can't tell you one day I'd love to set up a nonprofit to help victims, because we can't help. Not everybody can afford our help. Most people have given, thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, in some cases, tens of thousands of their hard-earned dollars to the wrong person because they've been duped, businesses and individuals alike. And we get those distress calls, and it just breaks my heart every single time. And, there's so much victim blaming and shaming as well that goes on. And this is one of the few crimes we still actually blame the victim. Like, hello, we've been talking about don't click on links or open attachments. And I don't like that talk. The conventional wisdom, a lot of people will say things, well, humans are the weakest link. No, we're not. Your technology failed them, and somebody took advantage of them. You should be thinking about the human user story. And if your design were great, you would be able to reduce the impact on humans. Just like you think about a car. Cars are now mandated to have seatbelts, airbags. They have to meet minimum safety standards. And ostensibly, still accidents can happen, and sadly, lives are lost. But if you look at the statistics, many more people can survive car crashes these days than in the past because of all of the enhanced safety features. And maybe, possibly, because of the new safety features on cars, crashes are being avoided. You have less blind spots. You've got more alerts telling you, don't back up, don't go forward, watch out, there's somebody, to your right. All of those things help make people safer in cars. We have to do better by the human user story in technology.
So talk to me about like when you first get into banking, is that the role that sort of are you working in security in the role in optimizing user experiences, or walk me through that part of your career?
Sure. What's interesting is we didn't really have like it is today with a chief information security officer. A lot of the things when I first started in banking, most customer access systems went and talked to the mainframe behind the scenes. And what's old is new again, right? So here we are talking about, I was just listening to Oracle talking about how they're going to be building out tons of data centers. They're going to be doing mini nuclear plants because there's not enough power on the grid. And I think, oh, wow, here we go again. But so we had security executives who focused on the systems on the data access points on the mainframe and downloads and managing that. And I guess we didn't know how good we had it, having things very centralized. And then, fast forward though, as we put more of the bank's business in the hands of digital devices of the customers, both in commercial, middle market, small business, and consumers, that's where fraudsters really started to enhance their tactics. So fraudsters were doing, and they're still doing it, check washing, check kiting, in-person fraud, fraudulent credentials. There's all of those things still continue today. And then on top of that, now you have these digital transactions that happen between customers and their financial institutions, and fraudsters are able to play a role there. So for me, I always had responsibility for customer-facing systems. And because I had that responsibility, I had responsibility for working with our fraud partners and our security partners to make sure that we weren't building something in such a way that was creating an undue burden on them and on the customer. So you say that I always really, truly had responsibility for fighting fraud loss and for fighting, making sure that cybercrime wasn't happening, although I don't think we were calling it cybercrime in the 90s. But we were just calling it all fraud. It was just different types of fraud. And I did have a couple different stints where I supported the fraud departments. So anybody who was doing fraud loss collections or fraud fighting, fraud scorecards. So I did have that opportunity to support them and get sort of a bird's eye view, if you will, of the type of work fraud units do to really save customers from being victims of fraud or figuring out what happened.
Hey guys, Scott here. I just wanted to take a quick moment to say a heartfelt thanks to every single one of you. 6 years of this show, and it's really all because of you. Your listens, your support, your shares, it's what keeps this thing going. When I started, I had no idea how big this would get, how many lives we touch, the stories we share, the lessons that we learn together. It's truly humbling, and I believe that we're building something really special here, a community where no one has to reinvent the wheel. We're all in this together, learning and growing. And here's my ask. If you love this show, if it's made a difference for you, please share it with somebody who needs it. Tell a friend, post on social, whatever works. It's the best way to keep this thing going strong, bring on even better guests, and share more life-changing wisdom. And you can find us on all the spots. So you can go to successstorypodcast.com if you like listening to podcasts. If you like video, you can go to YouTube. It's youtube.com/c/Scott D. Clary, or the newsletter.scottdclary.com. Just spread the word. I'm eternally grateful for each and every one of you. Let's keep learning, let's keep growing, and let's keep making this world a little bit better together. All right, let's get back to the show. But then at some point in your career, you obviously moved into that CISO role, Chief Information Security Officer role. So, I mean, there's obviously, was it some sort of event? Was it natural career progression? What was the thing that you kept seeing repeatedly that you're like, I can not only do this in private, and I can not only fight back against fraud in private industry, but then eventually you're so passionate about it that you do it at the highest levels of government. So it's not just, I don't think when somebody moves from private to public service, it's just because it's a good job. I think that you have to have some incredible passion for this thing, because it's not easy to do it in public service. Not to say that it's easy to be a CISO of a large company either, but it's not like it's not a money reason for the move or anything like that. If anything, it's probably a downgrade. but I'll leave that there. So what was the point that you moved into sort of roles and responsibilities more related to security and intelligence?
No, sure. So really the role at the White House of Chief Information Officer, and at that time it was incredibly broad. So it included our version of intelligence operations to support the Executive Office of the President, all of the systems, including the help desk, and it also included the security of all of those systems. And I really, what an incredible honor to have been called, to ask to be interviewed, and to be considered, and then to be offered the job and to do the job is an incredible honor. I love my country. I love the United States. I have a whole family of U.S. military and law enforcement, and when the opportunity came up, you're right, it is a tremendous pay cut after coming from financial services. You know, you have stock, have your compensation plan, and maybe I should have had stock in the U.S. government. What were goals? But it is a pay cut, and it is a tough job. But I'm very mission focused and mission oriented, and I felt like, wow, we've got all these men and women serving overseas. You know, this is post 9/11, so it's 2006 to 2008. And I have family members who served, and this is my opportunity. This is my opportunity to serve in my way with the gifts that I've been given, to give back to my country, who's been so great to my family and so great to me. And while I was there, it's interesting because I really thought I'd seen it all. You know, after working in financial services for 16 years, you've seen pretty much every type of fraudster. You've, heard about criminals who crawled up on roofs and actually fell through the roof, and security sitting right there. I mean, you feel like crazy stories, crazy antics of criminals and fraudsters. So you pretty much think you know it all as far as like what's going on out there. And even working on, anti-money laundering and know your customer, you see a lot. And then I sat in my first briefing, my first classified briefing, and started to learn the various capabilities of the adversaries of the United States. And it just changed me. It was like a switch flipped. And I thought, I don't think people understand the dire situation that we're in. And I don't hear people talking about securing the human user story. I hear people talking about add more firewalls, add more tools, follow this framework. And if you follow this framework, then you're going to be great. Or if you would just implement these controls, it stops 80% of everything. And it was like this conversation about security never talked about the humans at all. It was all about tools and products and one pane of glass. And I'm like, well, where's the human in the whole thing?
This is when you transitioned into the White House.
Yeah. And so I really thought long and hard about this and the getting briefed on what the adversary was up to. And I told my husband, because I was commuting back and forth every week and small children at home. And I said to him, I believe I know what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my career. And I don't believe I'm going to go back and be just a chief information officer. I think I have to focus on human user stories, secure digital transformation. I need to make sure that we talk about, not reveal anything classified, of course, but that we need to talk about these risks that are coming and really in sort of a more organic, authentic way be focused on cybersecurity. And so I started interviewing for jobs when it was time to leave the White House. And I was 7 months pregnant with my little girl, and nobody was talking about cybersecurity this way. It was still very much product and tool, like a solution driven, like I'm a hammer in search of a nail, I'm a saw in search of a board. And my husband just encouraged me to start my own company. And he said, why don't you do it your way? And he said, if nobody wants to hire you, you can, after the baby gets older, like you could just say, hey, I did independent consulting and now I'm back in corporate America. And, that was 2009. And here we are.
I love it. And it's so interesting. So you felt that you moved from private, you saw every kind of financial fraud and otherwise in private. Obviously, it was like a light bulb moment, for lack of a better term, when you moved into the White House, and then you saw what true threat is. It's not just people trying to get some money. It's now probably sovereign nations trying to attack the U.S. and whatnot. So it's a whole other level. But you still felt in private and public, it was still focusing on the tools, not the people. And you mentioned like the human story. You mentioned this a few times, and I want to understand what that is. I'm curious. Maybe paint a picture for people that aren't in tech and cybersecurity. You don't really know this world. What is the issue with focusing on tools as a CIO? I said CISO before. That was I misspoke. CIO. Yeah.
These titles change all the time. I always tell people, just call me Theresa. The title's not. So hi, Theresa. I work in technology. That's good enough.
No, that's good. So the point is, so what's the missing element? And also what is the missing element when you don't include the human story, which is kind of like, to your point, where the world was. Not just private, but in public service and government as well. It's where the world was. And then what is the issue with that? What's the opportunity for a malicious actor if you don't include the human story as part of your cybersecurity threat analysis, whatever you want to call it?
Sure. So I'll give you, this is going to be a little bit of a simpler example. So my more technical friends will say, well, this is why you do these other things. But let's just start with strong passwords. Do you love them?
I hate them.
No, nobody except for security loves strong passwords. Nobody loves them. But we all have to use them, right? So you can't use password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's time to retire that. Anybody listening? Yeah, I've never met anybody who loves those, but that was a construct come up with over time because people would say, well, it's really easy to guess your password. So if we make it long and we require special characters and we require upper and lowercase and we require you to change it every 90 days and you're not allowed to have like a version of the last 10 ones that you had. And now we have to do secret answers and questions and all of these things. And nobody likes that. So what do a lot of people do to work around that? Because they can't remember them all. They write them down on Post-it notes. They have a document on their laptop called passwords. Whatever it is that they do, we're just trying to live our lives. And so that's an example of where there was no human-centered design there at all around, you know what, we just make it user ID and password. Oh, shoot, these bad guys keep guessing passwords. Make it super long and super complex. Okay, now enter in two-factor authentication. Do you love two-factor authentication?
It's not as bad as the passwords, but it's still a little annoying sometimes.
Now you got to do the strong password. And now you have to remember, like, you're going to get a code, or maybe you have to scan a thing. Depending on what the system is, it's all different. And so now you have to do that. These are important things that we've implemented. And I'm not saying don't do strong passwords and don't do two-factor authentication. But again, they weren't really thinking about the human user story. Do you know who thinks about the human user story all day long? Cyber criminals and fraudsters. They know better than you and me what our company processes are. They know better than you and me when we get an urgent phone call, how our heart's going to race, how our pulse is going to change, and how we're going to react. They just know human nature. They study human user stories. They know that there's going to be a strong password. They know that there's going to be a two-factor authentication code. So what do? They trick people into giving those up. And it's very convincing social engineering. So every time we layer something on, all it is another thing for cyber criminals and fraudsters to just figure out and just trick us into giving it up. And then the security industry says, that's why humans are the weakest link. And I'm like, no, we're the weakest link in the security industry because we keep designing terrible processes and technology around the human user story. It should be seamless. It should be elegant. It should be easy. And it should be things we already know about the person that the cyber criminal and fraudster won't know. And we've got to be constantly rethinking how we do our designs. We need to be as creative as Steve Jobs was at Apple in how we think about security constructs. So we've got to change and shift our way of thinking, and it has to start with that human user story. Ignore it at our own peril, because every time we add this another layer of complexity on the user's shoulders, the cyber criminals and fraudsters figure it out, and they get in between us and the systems and the security.
Do you feel like there's an example? And I have a thought. I usually find, this is my personal opinion, that government is not leading the way in terms of bleeding edge technology. I find that for a lot of technology, I find that it's private industry. Now, I don't know about security because I don't have clearance and I've never worked in that particular role, but I'm sure government security is exceptional, but I don't believe that they've ever led the way. And maybe I'm incorrect, and I'm curious about that. But when you look at what you did, the work in the White House, do you believe that some of the things that maybe the government, the White House does, we should incorporate? Or do you feel like it's the opposite? Do you feel like they should start to incorporate maybe or hire more people from the outside and private industry that are more innovative? Or is the innovation there and it's just a very bureaucratic process? So I'm curious about the dynamic of innovation in the White House. And then I'll have a follow-up to that. I don't like to do two-pronged questions, but I'm just very curious. Now, the follow-up is, okay, we talk about innovation in the White House, but the follow-up is the human story. If the White House is doing it well, if private's doing it well, or if there's an example of anybody doing it well, then we can sort of like wrap our mind around what good security looks like. But we can start with just in terms of innovation in the White House. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I probably had it luckier than most at the White House because it's neither a department or an agency. So the layers of approval processes are very lean at the executive office of the president, certainly where nobody's going to waste taxpayer money. Like there's processes in place to make sure things aren't wasted. But as far as getting approval, I would sit down with senior staff. I worked very hard to earn their trust and show that the team would perform and deliver on our promises. And that always served us well when I had an ask for something that was innovative or new. I would come in and make my business case, and I would get peppered with a lot of questions, but I had tremendous support from senior staff to get done what needed to get done. So I'm not sure everybody has that level of support and awareness around them with their executive team. But I feel like I did. And so when I proposed different things to them, as long as I could make the business case and show what the value would be, show I had the budget or could find the budget to get it done, we could do it. Also, the other thing I would say is the private sector and the government, different pockets are leapfrogging each other in innovation and creativity. And a lot of people talk about we need more public-private sector cooperation. We need more public-private sector share. Like that sounds like the holy grail, and I'm a huge Monty Python fan, and I often feel like I'm at the end of the movie. I'm like, wait, where is it? Why is everybody leaving? And so I'm in search of the holy grail, and I don't think there's a perfect way to do a public-private sector partnership. It's not very scalable doing it at the human networking level, but it's a good place to start. And so if we can find these safe places to do innovation and information sharing. There's some great things happening. For example, I was just in Brazil and was visiting with a fraud tech company called Unico and visiting different banks and fintech companies. And they're rolling out this really cool new technology around proof of life to make sure you're not actually being frauded by a deep fake that's a representation of me, for example, or a representation of you. And so, like, for example, on the Zoom, how do you know it's really me and not my avatar? Like, I could have created an avatar to spend some time with you, but it's authentically me. And I know it's authentically you. But being able to, in these like high stakes transactions or big money movement transactions, being able to prove, fraud. And we had conversations around information sharing and the government and fintech and sort of like that open collaborative nature of fighting crime should never be seen as a competitive advantage. You shouldn't be sitting on those intellectual assets. Like, how do we help everybody do a better job at fighting crime? It's good for consumers, it's good for government, it's good for business. And, just seeing that information sharing that was going on while I was in Brazil for 3 days was pretty incredible. And you have to have that sharing. As you see these verticals, one is struggling and one's doing great, being able to share the innovation is critical. So the more frameworks we can do both nationally and internationally around true innovation and information sharing under Chatham House rules, under, a forum that makes things better is just going to help us solve these issues. The banking industry they do have a fraud alliance. They do have a cybersecurity alliance, and they do share, they bust fraud rings together. They do share things and don't see that as, competitive advantage to hold on to information. So they do share. How can we replicate that model across all industry verticals?
No, I agree with that. And I think that's probably the best way forward. It's just, when you talk about like the optimal fraud prevention and security, I was curious who's leading right now? Is it the government? Is it private? And then what does leading look like? Who's doing it the way that you would want it done?
Well, I have a softness in my heart for the financial services industry, no doubt. I spent 16 years there. But if you think about it, the financial industry leads the way on a lot of things because why? They have the money. Where do bank robbers go? They go where the money is. And they're looking for these opportunities to attack the banks clients, attack the bank's vendors, because they know there's a lot of money flowing through. And they're hoping if they could just, be a micro transaction swimming in the sea of macro transactions, maybe they'll get away with it. And so I do see the financial services industry leading the way on both, kind of anti-fraud and anti-cybercrime measures. But there's also a lot of great work being done, for example, in the energy sector. So the energy sector thinks about things like, well, what if somebody cut the power supply? That would be terrible. When if somebody maliciously took out the power, took out a dam, took out a nuclear reactor, took out solar, took out wind, took out electricity. And so there's an incredible amount of innovation and great work going on in each industry vertical. And it's just hard to sort of extract that and share that across industry verticals and back and forth with the government.
I just want to take a second to thank the sponsor of today's episode, HubSpot. Now, HubSpot has an incredible podcast network. Success Story is part of it. And if you like Success Story, you're going to love other podcasts in their network. One of my favorites is iDigress. It's hosted by Troy Sandage. What Troy does exceptionally well is in under 30 minutes, he helps eliminate complexity, complications, confusion in your business. He talks about frameworks, strategies that really work to help you achieve scalable and sustainable success. So you need to go listen to iDigress, one of the most useful podcasts for entrepreneurs and founders, part of the HubSpot podcast network, wherever you get your podcasts. That makes sense. When, and just, you met, like, again, like the human experience that we're trying to fix, because I've had other security experts on this show before, and they do speak about the human problem and the phishing attacks And you just mentioned something that's very interesting. Like, everybody hates these super complex passwords, but we know we got to do them. And everybody, 2FA is annoying, but we got to do it. And I guess, you have your like Google Auth that seems to work well. And I personally hate doing like the texting 2FA, not for like SIM swap reasons, but mostly because sometimes I don't get a text. It's just a pain in the ass. And it just seems like it's a lot of effort. And again, if I got a phone call from an AI voice that said, it's your brother and it sounds like him and I'm stressed out and he says he was arrested, and I've heard stories of this kind of fraud, and then it just like pulls at your heartstrings and you feel stressed out and you want to help the person and you go wire the money or whatever. I mean, there's a million different types of fraud that I've even haven't fallen victim to, but people have tried to target me for a variety of different reasons. I've had employees with spoofed emails emailing me that they want to change their banking information, like a whole bunch of different things, right? However, you said that you made a good point. So the fraudster is going to understand there's a complex password, they're going to understand there's 2FA, and they're just going to layer on a human component and they're going to try and trick you into doing something. But and the answer is not blame the human, but then how do you solve that? Because humans are humans and they're always going to have an emotional reaction to these, like the social engineering that a fraudster is going to put together.
Absolutely. So one of the things that, one of the principles that I have is, if you study the profile of cyber criminals and fraudsters, nation states, you start to see they have a pattern of how they, attack the different chinks in the armor, if you will. And so the goal sometimes, you want to do the basics. You want to have good digital hygiene practices. You want to invest in tools. You want good processes. But really, oftentimes, the best thing that stops the bad guys is designing something they didn't expect. So, for example, having a passphrase that's not easily guessed. So if you're sitting on, there was a recent wire transfer fraud where the employee, part of their protocol is you get on a video conference with the CFO or the CEO or somebody else, and you have proof of life. And the employee was on a video conference and was told to do the wire transfer. Did the wire transfer. If part of the protocol had said, "So good to see you. What's the passphrase?" And the passphrase was like something ridiculous that nobody else would know.
Yeah.
Then you probably would have had somebody hang up, and it would have stopped that from happening. You can use this in your personal life. So you were mentioning like the virtual kidnapping type thing.
Yeah.
Like I don't know about you, but like I grew up, my sister and I, my dad would play a little game with us. When we walked into a room, restaurant, wherever, and he'd say, "Okay, without turning your head, where are the exit doors? Where will you hide if something bad happens? What will your weapon be?" Did you grow up and play that game?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So my dad was in, I'm Canadian, so my dad was in the RCMP and then he moved into CSIS. So he was always adjacent to a lot. Well, CSIS is Canadian Security Intelligence, right? So yeah, so he was very aware.
You had a similar childhood experience, and then it just became muscle memory for you.
Yes.
So you probably, even today, I know I do, I can walk into a room and without really looking, I know where everything is. I literally was giving a talk, huge place. I'd never been there before. And the fire alarm went off long enough that I said, "Hey, everybody, I know where the fire exit is. Please follow me," until the fire alarm goes off. So I get off stage and everybody follows me orally out. And the place was like, we've never seen anybody do that. I'm like, well, my dad trained me. So my point in bringing that up is have this passphrase. Play that game with your family, by the way, on where are the exits. It's really important. A lot of people really underestimate that. But the same thing with the passphrase. So I'll just like in the kitchen before dinner, I'm like, "Anybody know the passphrase?" I'm like, "Well, then you're not getting rescued if you call me and tell me you're in jail or somebody's got you. Like, you have to give me the passphrase." So that's something you can apply in your personal life as well. And again, each one of these things are typically just studying what's our process. How will criminals and fraudsters try to enter inject themselves into the process? And how do we do something completely unexpected?
That's really it. It's about removing the routine out of, our activity, our day to day, so that it can't be guessed. That's really it. Something that can never be the hacker, the fraudster. There's no way they're ever going to be able to know this. That's the goal. That's really the goal.
And make it simple. Make it simple, not a strong password.
Because the purpose is it doesn't matter really what the word is. It's just that it's there. That's really the goal. I want to ask you some more just questions about some of your time in the White House, because I find that fascinating. And obviously, you speak about what you can speak about, and don't get yourself in trouble. But I am curious about some of when you walk into the White House, you say the general public is not aware of really the threats that are going on. So what are some things that the public should know about that they're kind of oblivious to? Like, what is coming at the U.S.? Why are we in trouble? Why, like, I think you mentioned at some point, like, it's not, unicorns and rainbows when it comes to cybersecurity. And people know about other nation states, and they understand that, China exists and Iran exists and Russia to an extent exists. But maybe a little bit more clear as to what is actually happening that we have no clue or we don't pay attention to.
Yeah, well, I mean, for example, cyber criminals, like especially nation states, and then people who are loosely affiliated, because for the record, China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea say they don't have nation state operatives hacking into American infrastructure. So they say that. So I'm just going to give that disclaimer from them. But what's interesting is they first primarily focused on what's referred to as the defense industrial base. They would go after the U.S. government, U.S. military, departments and agencies, White House. Then they'd go after the vendors, the big vendors that provide airplanes or weapons or anything else to the government. But then they realized, they might be leaving money on the table. Maybe we should steal, I don't know, intellectual property, trade secrets, and then reverse engineer and manufacture our own stuff and compete with the U.S., kind of even the playing field. We'll just steal their R&D, we'll skip that process, and we'll just reverse engineer it and produce it here. And China, for one, is really good at doing that. And so that was something that was very eye-opening to me at that time, because that wasn't really being discussed. And if any companies at that time were falling victim to that, they weren't talking about it because they were worried their competitors would take advantage of it. So I think that's something, that was a big aha moment for me. Many people may not realize this. I'm sure most people assume attacks against White House are constant. It's a constant barrage, and that is correct. But what's interesting is like I learned, for example, because we have whitehouse.gov, and whitehouse.gov is not connected like to anything. Like there's not like, hey, the president's secret briefing is just right behind whitehouse.gov. Like it's really just meant to be sort of a, here's where the executive orders are, and like, hey, look at President Bush's dogs, Barney and Miss Beasley, and watch Barney run around the White House. One of the favorite videos of my kids was Barney at Christmas time, watching things get decorated and running around with a little Barney cam on. Probably the Payton household was the biggest consumer of Barney video, but the president's dog. And it's really meant for that. But for whatever reason, if there was a visiting head of state from another country who had a beef with somebody else or different things that were going on, we would sometimes, according to our vendors and routers and our own monitoring, be the most attacked website in the world on certain days. Now, if the website goes down, it's incredibly embarrassing, but the website isn't where people get money. And the website's not it's not connected to classified systems or anything like that. But for whatever reason, that was a kind of a digital representation, a public face, if you will, of the White House. So a vitally important page to not have commandeered and defaced, which was a very popular thing at that time. Let's take over this department and agency's webpage and put, long live Iran, or, something like that. So those are, some of a little bit of an inside ball without giving too much away of, the types of things that you have to think about and deal with that shape my thinking when I work with companies and people today.
That's interesting. I actually, I had a few people on that spoke about this, but Dmitry Alperovich, who spoke about, so he spoke about some of the work that he did with Google and McAfee when he realized that nation states were actually targeting the U.S. I think that was, I can't remember the name of there was like an instance, and I am blanking on it now. I didn't write it. Yes, that's it. Yeah, exactly. So it's just it's very interesting how constant we are bombarded. And I don't know if everybody really thinks about that it's like a daily thing. I think most people think that intermittently there will be attacks, not just constant attacks, which is it's a little bit stressful when you think about your role and what you had to sort of handle. So there's always these attacks happening, whether or not they're on whitehouse.gov, or which are obviously the ones that could be embarrassing, or the ones that are more serious, that are targeting actual mission critical systems like you mentioned. Is there, in your mind, a concern, because we always speak about nuclear war and the concern about nuclear war. Are you just as concerned about a nuclear war version of a cyber attack or a cyber war?
Absolutely. The question would be, why would they want to do it? So you always have to think about motive, opportunity, and then are they prepared for the repercussions? And when I think about the mayhem that can be created by a nation state or a cyber criminal syndicate, it can be pretty significant. And it doesn't just have to be the systems that we think about. It can be space too. A lot of our internet connectivity is dependent upon space. It's not just undersea cables, although those are really important to protect too. So you've got multi-layered levels of opportunity for infrastructure to be impacted. But at the same time, that's multi-layers of connectivity and digital that it would be hard to attack them all at the same time. I'm not saying impossible, but you'd have to have a pretty well orchestrated attack to go after the undersea cables, the satellite and, broadband cables to take out all internet. But the question is a nation state who decides to play the long game, they might be thinking about opportunities like that. So to me, I do think about war in the sense of, coming from a military family, there's land, air, and sea. There's the digital realm, but there's also space.
I think that if you think about the most alarming cybersecurity opportunities, you think about internet, obviously, that's connectivity. You think about power grid, like you mentioned before. You could also think about like nuclear launches as a potential not opportunity, but like a target, excuse me. But I mean, obviously the systems and protections in all of these circumstances are so extensive. What would be something that you think going forward outside of just space would be another target for malicious actors that eventually we're going to have to pay more attention to?
Leveraging quantum computing to break all of our encryption.
How far are we away from that?
It's a race. We're not going to know until we know who wins.
That's very scary because they have quantum computing already.
Yeah, it's not like commercially available yet. And there are really smart people working on post-quantum computing encryption. And for lay people, here's what I want you to think about. away about quantum computing. So today's computing, even though it looks cool and sexy, like your mobile app you might be using, behind the scenes, it's just ones and zeros on a computer. So everything's just ones and zeros. And today's computers, I can add more memory, I can add more storage, you can kind of tweak the programming to leverage everything that's there. But at the end of the day, you're flipping ones and zeros to make the program work. Quantum computing is stateless computing. So nothing is a 0 or 1. There's no flipping zeros and ones. So you can have an instruction go out, and instead of being a linear set of instructions across like multiple memory, soft memory, software memory, and hardware memory, and disk space, etc., quantum computing is stateless. So you can process mathematical instructions and handle mathematical calculations at a speed and scale we've never seen before. And right now, there's some quantum computing, but like the scale of like the power that it needs for cooling, electricity, the processing power, we're still in our infancy stages for quantum computing. But once it becomes generally available and something that's scalable, isn't environmentally as harmful as it is today with the energy that it needs to consume, it's just going to basically run mathematical calculations at a speed and scale we've never seen before. Encryption of your passwords, of your data, of systems is nothing but a big old math problem. So quantum computing with today's encryption can unlock these mathematical problems at a speed and scale we haven't seen before, which is why we need post-quantum computing and encryption. So the question is who wins the battle first? Who figures out post-quantum computing encryption so it's ready when it comes, or who figures out busting encryption and getting quantum computing in the hands of evildoers before that happens? And then even if post-quantum computing encryption is available, it may not be simple and easy to implement. So how long will it take everybody to get it implemented before it's in the hands of cyber criminals to use quantum computing? That's the race we're under. And you've got really smart, good people working on this issue, and you've got, sadly, smart evildoers working on their set of priorities.
Then, and the last piece, I mean, we sort of touched on, very briefly touched on AI and how it can be used to fraud. But another piece of technology outside of AI, because AI is not quantum, AI is still with binary computing. So it's still not, outside of using it maliciously to interpret or to create avatars or to replicate a voice, which is now, that is commercially available. And you have all these systems like that password to show proof of life. These are kind of the ways that we keep up with emerging technologies and fight back against malicious use. But then when you see something like Neurolink, that must be like a huge red flag for you, because now you're putting computers into people's bodies. So that's like a whole other, I mean, if you have, I don't even know how Neuralink works, but I mean, anything that's a computer can be hacked to some degree. That's very scary.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've talked about pacemakers, for example.
Oh, that's true. They've been around for a long time.
Yeah. And what's interesting about Neuralink technology, I think about, wow, that technology can help people who are paralyzed move their limbs. It could help people who they can't speak, or they can't hear, or they can't see. It may actually give vision to the blind, or some type of virtual reality or something. And we're still in the infancy stages of this, but this is why we're way behind on ethics. We're way behind on saying, what are the ethics around technology? We didn't do it for social media, which is a huge disappointment to me, around algorithms and the addictive properties of algorithms and how harmful those addictive properties of algorithms could be. You would think we would have learned our lessons. Anything that's addictive in society, we have warning labels on them.
Of course.
We've done nothing. And some lives are absolutely ruined and sadly some lives lost because we didn't figure out how to warn people, how to create ethics and governance around social media, big tech, and algorithms. So here we are, we're advancing technology yet again, and we really don't have a lot of protections and rights for, back to the human user story of you're going to implement this technology. What are the do's and the don'ts of the technology? You know, what does the International Body of Medicine say where the technology should be limited and should have guardrails and should stop?
No, go ahead. I was going to say, it's just interesting how we focus on security, but we don't focus on the ethics when we roll something out.
Our security jobs would actually be easier to do if we focused on the human user story and ethics. Like if there were guardrails around, and ethics can be translated as governance, it could be translated as regulation, it could be translated as an ethos. You know, these are our guiding principles. But because we don't focus enough on ethics, everybody else has to make up for the gap, right? So you have to think about, you know, what are the ramifications? Just because we can do something, should we do something? And a lot of those things, unless you have governance or laws or regulation or ethics, a stated code of ethics, they just don't get handled the right way.
I want to take a second and thank the sponsor of today's episode, LinkedIn. Now, let me share a quick story. When I was looking to hire for my team, I needed someone who not only had the skills, but also fit our company culture. I turned to LinkedIn Jobs and it made the process seamless. The quality of candidates I found was exceptional and it saved me tons of time. Having quality candidates to interview is essential, and LinkedIn Jobs makes it incredibly easy to find them. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. It's a platform that connects you with professionals you won't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching but might be open to the perfect role. And did you know that 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites? If you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're missing these candidates. Plus, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours on LinkedIn. And they're always looking to make the process easier. They even launched a feature to help you write job descriptions. So if you're ready to find your next great hire, post your job for free at linkedin.com/excellence. That's linkedin.com/excellence to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. For people that are listening that are not in the government and not private industry and not big banks and financial institutions, and they're like, okay, this is a little bit concerning, but I'm ultimately worried about, you know, my Alexa listening to my conversations or my email getting hacked or something like that. What are the things in your day-to-day that you should be paying attention to? Again, you covered the passphrase and it's a great strategy, but are there devices? Are there, you know, Wi-Fi networks that can be hacked? Like, what are the concerns, day in the life of somebody that's just trying to live their life?
Yeah, personal security does bleed into professional security, so your workplace. And we're finding that as workplaces do a better job protecting the company systems, what do fraudsters and cyber criminals do? They don't suddenly say, I'm going to be a good person and bake pies for my neighbor. They just go down the kill chain. And so, okay, I couldn't get in here. Well, I guess I'll go to the employee. And believe it or not, they can at scale get to employees in their homes. And they've done it. They go to their personal email, they find them on social media, and they can do this all at scale with computer programs. And they can get people's personal emails, target them that way, target them on LinkedIn, social media platforms, home Wi-Fi, home devices. And I don't want everybody to feel like they have to unplug and start wearing tinfoil hats. Although, tinfoil hats are cute. But there are some basic things that you can do at home. And it's really going to be based on your personal preferences for privacy and security. So not everything that I do is something that everybody else wants to do for them and their family. But I'll give a couple simple examples. One, hide your Wi-Fi name. And if you don't know how to do that, just ask your internet services provider how to hide the name. and create a guest network. So when people come to visit, you give them, the login. That can be a great way to just sort of kind of lock down the Internet of Things devices you have at your house, lock down the traffic at your house. Never use something out of the box without looking for a way to change the password. That's another kind of like basic thing. Two-factor authentication. I know it's clunky. If you get offered it, take it. Because if somebody's trying to like reprogram your security cameras around your house and you have two-factor authentication turned on, guess what? The code comes to you, not the bad person. Devices, are they listening to you? They're going to tell you they're not. This is what I'm going to tell you about how technology works. If technology has something in it that's trained to wake up and listen to you when you issue it a command, it's always going to be in a state of thinking, I might have heard that command. And it's going to wake up, and whether you know it or not, it's going to listen, may record. So just understanding that, I'll give you an example, because I want my 3 Gen Z kids to make conscious decisions about on the grid and off the grid. So if we're having family discussions about being on vacation or anything like that, we make sure we're in a room where there's no devices, no phones, no Internet of Things devices. We have a nice conversation. We map everything out, and then we'll leave the room and go on about our business. Again, for some people, they may say, well, that sounds like another level of paranoia. And I say it's only paranoia if it's not true. So a little bit of nerd humor for you there. But these are all different strategies that you can take. If you want to go like a little further with it, you can use a privacy forward browser like Brave. So all of your searches, you can use Brave, and Brave's got a lot of really cool features built in for free. They do ask people if they want to donate to just kind of help them continue to improve the browser. You can, but they were built from the ground up, focused on your privacy, whereas Google says we've built privacy features in that you can opt into. So that's the difference in my mind about a privacy forward browser versus a browser that has privacy settings. And then you can continue to sort of grow and build from there. But those are some basic things that I recommend everybody consider using.
And we touched on this at the beginning, but password management. So there's tools like LastPass. Obviously, writing stuff down on a piece of paper is probably not great. Putting a document on your desktop saying passwords is probably not great. What do you recommend people do? Because a lot of people can't remember. I mean, I can't remember 30 different passwords.
Yeah, have a system that works for you. So for some people, they don't want to use a password vault. And I understand that. Password vaults can be incredibly helpful. If you use one, I highly recommend really locking that down, not just with the strong password, but think about having like a hardware key as well, like a YubiKey, where it's strong password to get into your vault, and you got to have a physical key, or you lock it down and say, well, only if it's accessed on this computer. There's nothing wrong with if you wanted to have like a book that you don't call it passwords, where you kind of create a sort of a coded, you don't say like, this is my bank ABC, an ID and password, but there's nothing wrong with kind of created a coding system for yourself to say, this is the password I'm using for this. Another strategy that some people use is they always reset their password every time they log in. So every time they log into their bank, they say, forgot my password, and they actually go through all the rigmarole to change their password and log in. These are different strategies, not, I try to give different sort of ideas for people to use to kind of, not one size fits all.
Yeah, but it is about having a system that at least I think the takeaway is put a little bit of thought into your system, more than probably 99% of people do.
And don't do things like spring 2024 ! Summer 2024 ! Or like, if everybody knows, it's really hard to be an NFL Panthers fan right now. I'm just going to say, So I grew up, I lived all over the place. So I follow the Eagles and I root for the Eagles, but I live in the Carolinas, and the Panthers are my home team. And it's like really hard to be a Panthers fan. But if you are a Panthers fan and people know it, don't use Panthers in your password. And you'd be surprised how many people, it's like
I have no doubt.
Super Bowl or Broncos Super Bowl, and people can guess that. It's not that hard. And many websites allow 3 to 5 password attempts before it logs you out. Guess what cyber criminals do? They figure out how many per website. So each day they try one less than what will have a lockout. And they come back the next day and try them again.
And now I'm sure that because I see it, because I get the alerts, like my past passwords have been hacked and put on the dark web somewhere. So they have a starting point to work from if they really want to.
They do. Yeah, that's another thing. You can turn on an alert if somebody's done a login from a new location. But watch out for those, because cyber criminals actually send fake alerts and get people to click on the link and type in their credentials. So be careful about those alerts. Never follow links in the alerts.
Are VPNs private? Are they useful? Are they
helpful? You have to kind of really pay attention to which vendor you're choosing. I'm also a big fan. There's a free tool called VirusTotal, and it checks over 60 different sources. It checks links and attachments, looking for basically danger. And so that can be a great way when you get sent a link or an attachment, you can actually put it for free in VirusTotal, and it's super simple. It scans it, and if there's something bad found, it marks it red.
Very good. No, very, very, very good. What do you think would be a radical change required in our education system just going forward to prepare people for the threats they're going to face and their kids are going to face?
You know, I love what Finland is doing. So they have a K through 12 digital citizenship, critical thinking skills program. And then they do public service announcements for the public geared at all age groups. And so they're not telling people, they're not labeling a point of view as misinformation or disinformation, because then that gets at, in America, people say, well, that's free speech. I'm allowed to say what I want. So instead, they don't do that. They just teach people how to do critical thinking skills, and they do it at every age level, and then they give them examples, and then they let people think for themselves. And I think that's the best way to do this, because otherwise you have people say, well, who's fact checking the fact checkers, or the fact checkers have bias, and so if you just teach everybody critical thinking skills and digital citizenship, it'll make a huge difference.
The one thing that actually, it's so funny, I got so into this conversation that I actually forgot to bring up the thing that we spoke about that we're going to talk about before we press record. So I think this is very interesting. It's very timely. So talk to me about elections, and talk to me about security regarding elections, because I know that this is a very hot topic in the U.S. and everywhere right now, but it's always been a hot topic, especially, over the past, last few elections. It's been brought up again and again and again and again. So what is your take on security and elections and protecting the results and all of it?
Yeah, all global elections are always sort of an area of consideration, because if you think about democracy, you have dictators and different types of government constructs that they're threatened. They don't really love democracy. They don't like seeing people voting for themselves and all people of all social classes voting and picking leaders. And so they want to make democracy look like a big dumpster fire and then convince their own citizens, you don't want that. We have it really good here. Look at these people. They're all arguing with each other and saying crazy things. And so I think what was interesting to me, so I've got a book, Manipulated. It's out in second edition. And when I first wrote the first set of research to release in 2020, I really thought that nation states were meddling to get us all to argue with each other, maybe influence and pick a winner or pick a loser. And I learned some other things that I was surprised to learn that kept getting confirmed over and over again in my research and talking to experts. And one of which was Dimitri, by the way, and in the book. And that was a couple of things. One, there are some operatives. It is about making us argue with each other. Yes, there are people trying to pick winners and losers, nation state leaders that, kind of want somebody to win and somebody to lose. But I also uncovered a couple other things. One, many of the nation states who meddle in European elections, US elections, other people's elections, they actually test everything out on their own citizens first. So they actually meddle internally, sending disinformation and misinformation to their own citizens to try and keep control. Everything is hunky-dory in this country because we're run this way, and look at democracy, it's a dumpster fire. And then they take the skills that they learned and the algorithms, and then they meddle in everybody else's elections. The other thing that I learned is there's a whole cottage industry of people who are not associated with nation states, and they're not necessarily associated with political campaigns. And these are the groups that figured out that during a political cycle, people are super active on social media, and if they can get you to click and share and post and repost and click through on the clickbait, they make pennies on the click. And so they actually make loads of money, and for them, it's all about capitalism. And so if promoting a fake narrative or a debunked narrative gets you to click on a link and share it, and they make pennies on the click, death to democracy, but their wallets get fat. That's kind of that. So some of those very surprising to me when I did my research. And so what I would just ask everybody to do, because there are wonderful things going on, both at the government level, in the United States, every state is responsible for their own election infrastructure. A lot of great work has gone on at the state level and the U.S. government level to help make sure the states have the funding and the resources to roll out election processes that are best for their state, because every state is so different. On the social media side, there's been a lot of work done trying to shut down bots, shut down inauthentic accounts, looking for that misinformation and disinformation. But nothing's going to fix this problem. Propaganda has been around, and misinformation, disinformation, since there were two people walking the earth. It's always going to be with us. So that's why it's so important for us to help each other. So I always tell people, have 3 sources that you check. So if you have a real emotional reaction, positive or negative, chances are you might be in a manipulation campaign, and it might have truth and it might have mistruth. So I always take a local source that's trusted, embedded news source, a national source, and an international source. And so if I see something that gives me a reaction, either, aha, I knew it, or that seems incredible, or whatever it is, I go to 3 different sources and see what they're saying about it. And if it's not portrayed exactly the same way, it's possible in my feed there was a manipulation campaign. So I always tell people, try to do that. Also, if you have someone you care about, friend, colleague, loved one, and they're falling prey to manipulation campaigns, the worst thing you can do is actually point it out and say, you've fallen prey to a misinformation campaign. That is not the way to bring them around. The best way to bring them around is hear them out, ask them how they got their information, ask if you can process what they just told you, and then you go away and do your own looking here, looking there, and say, I thought a lot about what you said. I also did some research, and I'd love to share with you what I found. Meet them where they are in that moment with grace and space. And again, from a critical thinking standpoint, you don't have to say you fell prey to something. Nobody wants to hear that. So go to them and just say, and I did some research too, and I found this to be interesting. I just want to share with you what I found. You may not change their mind in that moment, but you may open them up to the possibility of digging a little deeper and asking more questions.
It seems like the answer to a lot of the problems that we face in manipulation and security and threats, the answer is a lot of just injecting the human component into it. Because even that conversation that you have, I think I've seen this a lot, and I've had conversations about this during COVID when we're all isolated and we're all getting so angry on social media. It seems like when you remove the human component, people are very quick to fight over this point of view, that point of view. But the way that you just walk through just like a very simple process on how to not be combative in rebuking someone else's point of view, but really just get everybody to be a proponent and an advocate for critical thinking and just go through life that way. When you go through life that way, that seems to be a great way to just basically improve everyone and improve every circumstance that could be potentially manipulated. And I think that I'm sure that, I mean, I've never heard of that. That's so fascinating. The people that use misinformation to make money, they don't even care about the outcome. It's just, so it's not even like a nation state they just know that this particular story or this headline is going to get people to click through. So it's not even manipulation in the way that people think of manipulation.
No,
so
it's
like
scam marketing on another level. It involves manipulating how people think about elections.
That's fascinating. It's scary, but it's fascinating. But it just goes to show you how whenever you get information, I love your process of due diligence and vetting and critical thinking. But then again, know that not everybody listen to this podcast or has the same approach to vetting information. And that's the way you have to go through life. And that's the way that you have to approach maybe conflict. And like not even outside your own house. I know families that got into fights over misinformation and different points of view. And it just, especially during COVID, it's so much anger and so much hostility. And actually as a Canadian, I've noticed that a lot because I don't think Canadians take politics as seriously. Take it seriously, but they don't take it as seriously. Here, it's very serious, and it creates this very, very significant divide, or it feels like it. I don't think it's real. I don't think the divide is as real as it seems like on social media. But if you live too much on social media, you get pushed into these echo chambers, and it just creates this anger and this divide. It's just horrible. It's just absolutely horrible.
And and you're right. I heard about people saying, I'm going to have to uninvite this family member to Thanksgiving. And it was because at a certain point of view. And I'd say, please don't do that. Life is too short that over one issue, you're just not going to invite them. Just say like that. We're not going to talk about that topic.
Life is too short to lose family over politics. Way too short. Yeah. Is there anything that we didn't go into that you think is just something that's been on your mind lately, or some last words of wisdom that you want to leave the audience with?
I would say, I do have people say to me, gosh, I feel like I'm being left behind with AI. I don't have time to figure it out. I don't have time to look at it. I could be replaced by AI. I'm so far behind. And what I would say to you is, you're not. So for starters, AI should be enhancing the human experience, not the other way around. And and if you feel like you're being left out, don't worry. It changes every day, and you can get caught up. You can, watch great podcasts. You can dabble in it if you want to. You don't have to. But just like any technology transformation that's come along, there is some of that legitimate, like that FOMO, that fear of missing out, but also the fear of, will I be replaced? And what I would say is the power to change, especially white collar jobs, is definitely there with today's AI, but it's incredibly expensive to implement. It's hard to implement. And what I would say is that there's an essence of humans that's uniquely ours. And humans created computers, and humans created the technology. And even though we might have robots and humanoids and things like that in the future, the essence of human is something that's divinely created and given to us, and it will never be replicated. And so just know that you are unique, and let your essence of who you are as a human shine. And just a reminder that technology was built by humans to serve humans and to make our tasks and functions easier. And don't let any kind of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that's out there tell you otherwise.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Where should people go to just read more of your work, connect with you, listen to some more of the stuff that you've done a ton of research on, all the websites, the social, everything?
I'm sure. So for anybody on the professional front, LinkedIn, my company posts a lot of great stuff. It's not all from me. It's I've got really smart people that I get the honor to work with every single day. And so there's some really great stuff being posted on LinkedIn by the company accounts, Fortalice Solutions. And then I've got a personal account there that I post stuff. I am on X. I've been on X since 2009. So I've seen it in all iterations, but it's a great place to post things, read things, see things. We do have a company account on Instagram for people who are like, yeah, X and LinkedIn are not my thing. So you can follow us on Instagram as well. And yeah, those are great places to reach out and find things. And certainly if anybody has a chance to read Manipulated, would love to know your thoughts on it as you read it. And chances are it might not be for you. It might be something for you to read and pass along to somebody you care about.
I love that. We'll put all the links. So I'll get all the links. We'll put it in the show notes below. Last thing I like to ask is obviously you've had a career with many seasons. So, I mean, first private industry, public service, entrepreneurs, you've kind of done it all. If you go back and tell your 20-year-old self one thing, what would that be?
Sorry, my alarm went off, so you'll have to edit that.
No, you're good.
Take risks. It would be take more risks.
Take more risks. I love that. And I mean, you've done that over your entire career. You've done that with your own career. You've done that by diving into sort of the bleeding edge of security and tech. So I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for obviously all the work that you've given towards protecting people and keeping people safe and educating and the research and all of it. Because at the end of the day, the work you do is meant to make the world a safer place for everyone. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's an honor to be able to take the gifts that I've been given and all these wonderful opportunities that have found me and put it to good use to help other people be safe.